Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's presentation. We've chosen Namibia for the presentation this evening, and I think that given the rather inclement weather that we're having here in the UK, Namibia is a pretty good choice for your destination this evening. It's a country that I know really well. I've travelled there probably for the last nearly 30 years or so, almost once, sometimes twice a year, both leading groups for Wildlife Worldwide, and my own interest in the country has taken me there as well. And Emma here, who many of you know because you've travelled with her already. Or maybe you have spoken with her on the phone, and she's been your travel consultant, organising one of your fantastic holidays with Wildlife Worldwide. But I know that Namibia is a very special destination for Emma as well. Just to introduce you to myself, I'm Nick. I'm one of the directors at Wildlife Worldwide. As I alluded to, Emma here, who works for Wildlife Worldwide, is not only one of our travel consultants, but she's one of our wonderful photographic tour leaders as well. And this particular presentation is really going to be led by Emma rather than me. What we've got for you this evening is a Namibia presentation that's going to be about two trips. The main trip is going to be Emma's Wonders of Namibia photographic safari, which she's running next September, and she's going to be talking specifically and mainly about that particular trip, which is a superb itinerary that is really geared towards the photographers amongst you. It's been tailored and built in such a way that it is most suitable for the keen photographers. And then I'm going to talk a little bit, very briefly, if that's possible for me to do that, about a trip that I lead each October, which is called A Living Desert. And I'll just do a quick little 5 or 10 minutes or so, just overviewing what that trip is designed to do. The two trips, I would say they are premium trips. Namibia is without doubt a premier destination in Africa. If you haven't been before, I'm pretty confident that you'll all say that it's on your bucket list. And for those of you who have been before, I'm also pretty confident that it's a destination that you would want to go back to. And I know for sure that for a handful of you, you have definitely been there more than once, because you've been there more than once with me. And in actual fact, there's even one of you who's traveling there for a third time with me next year. You know who you are, Carolyn. So yeah, that's what this evening is all about. A few little bits of admin, just so that you're aware of how things work if you're not already familiar with this. You can ask questions and we'll answer those at the end of the presentation. You can ask the questions using the Q&A function. That's a button in your Zoom browser, or via the chat function. That's also a button in the Zoom browser. So feel free to drop in any questions as Emma's talking or as I'm talking. And then once we're done with that, then we'll just give you a quick, we'll ask you a question, which is whether or not you'd like to receive more information, either about Emma's amazing trip, about the trip that I lead, A Living Desert, or one or two other trips that we offer to Namibia. So Emma, hopefully I've done all that correctly. Is that right?
Yeah,
is there anything that I've missed? I hope
as far
not.
as I know.
It's been a long time since I've hosted one of these trips. And I should say, Emma, I'm going to embarrass you, I'm afraid. But I remember, everybody, when I did a presentation about Namibia in Chichester in the spring of 2018. And Emma was sat in the very front row watching, and she came to me at the end of the presentation and she said, I want to join Wildlife Worldwide. I want to know how I can get a job for Wildlife Worldwide. And here she is now, not only a brilliant travel consultant, not only a fantastic tour leader, but also a brilliant photographer who's keen to share with you her passion for Namibia. So Emma, it's over to you. I'll be here watching and wishing that I was in Namibia right now.
Thanks. Wow, what an intro, crikey. So hi everybody. I don't really need to do any more. I think Nick's done it all for me. So yeah, I've been here 7 years now since Nick kindly put a good word in for me. And any complaints you can let him know at the end.
There won't be any.
So let's get going. So we're here to talk about Namibia. Um, as Nick said, it's an amazing place to visit, and it's somewhere that I've been leading trips there now for 3 years, and I first went 12 years ago, not as long ago as Nick, but feels like a lifetime ago now, on a backpacking trip, and it was one of those ones that went from kind of South Africa all the way up through Fish River Canyon, all the way up through Sossusvlei, right up to the Etosha, and then up through to Botswana and Zambia. So it was a proper whistle-stop tour. But it was enough to kind of ignite my passion for it, and I just fell in love with it. And it was then that I knew I really wanted to go back. So there's a few things that I love, and I thought I'd focus initially on the landscapes because that is one of the things that really I think sets it apart from a lot of Africa. You get these beautiful kind of open roads. It's a bit like if you've ever driven, I don't know, the Route 66, but any of those roads across the US, and you just get these long straight roads. So the drives can be long. That's the one kind of negative about it, I guess. But the views along the way are absolutely stunning. So you can get the roads, a lot of it is tar roads, and they are improving the road system, but you will get a lot like this, which are slightly bumpier, but it's kind of part of the experience. And you can get out any point, look at those views. You can just get out and take pictures of the views and enjoy the valleys. Some of them are slightly more rocky. So you will get some that are like this, but this is more when you're doing your activity. So you'll be in the Land Cruisers. But I mean, just look at that landscape. To start a day with that, you can't be going wrong, can you? And then some of the areas you get a bit more sandy areas. But then you get more kind of opportunity. You can get out, there's no kind of barriers, fences. You can just get out and get some really lovely landscape shots. So when there is an opportunity, that's something that we really try and do. And one thing I just really wanted to focus on. So, like I say, I've been going the last 3 years, and the last 2 years it's been very, very dry. They had a drought. The rain has been almost non-existent. Whereas, actually, when we were in Damaraland last year, it rained really, really heavily, and that was the start of the rains, and it kind of never stopped. And I really noticed the difference this year. So driving along, just seeing all the greenery, the bushes, the animals seemed a lot happier. Everything was kind of spread out more, a bit fatter. So it was just a really lovely thing to see. Everywhere has this grass, which I know to most of us it looks like dead grass, but actually, for them, this is huge. This is really, tall grasses, green bushes. So for the wildlife, it's just been epic. And that there is the Bramberg Mountain, which is actually the highest point in Namibia that you drive past, and often quite difficult to see. But on this day, luckily, we had a good view. And the other thing that really got me this year was driving over the Uhab River. So you drive on the way down to Swakopmund, you drive over this river, and it's always been a completely dry, sandy riverbed. It's one of these things in Namibia. They say you're crossing a river and it's never a river, it's just always sand. But this year was the first year I'd seen it with water, and I got very excited. I mean, you can sort of see the dribble of water. Let's not get too excited. But everybody thought I was crazy, but we were really excited to see water in it. So yeah, it just goes to show, I think, how different things can be, and it sort of showed as well on the trip. So this is the trip itself, and kind of the area that we cover. It's a bit vague. The trip itself is kind of evolving year by year, and it's one of those ones. And I think with any wildlife trip, we always tweak it and improve it based on what's open, what's good at the time, where we can kind of get to and make work. So the first couple of years in that kind of shaded red circle, the first year we went to Irindi. Another year then the year after we went somewhere in the middle of that, and then this year we went to Okanjima. So a couple of the images I am going to be showing from the east of Etosha are going to include some of the areas, some of the wildlife from there. But at the moment, we're planning to go straight up to Onguma next year, but that may or may not change, but we'll keep you posted. But generally speaking, straight up north to Etosha, across Etosha, down to Swakopmund, and then for the first time next year, we're including Sossusvlei. So it's one of these things that especially, with a trip like this, it's only 6 people or 6 clients and myself. We listen to the feedback that we get each year and we kind of tweak it based on that. And a lot of people were saying they'd quite like us to include sausage So we have made a couple of changes and that is one of them. So hopefully that'll be quite exciting. So firstly, heading up to Etosha. So this is Onguma Bush Camp. It is a private reserve, about 34,000 hectares. And we stay at Onguma Bush Camp, but there are actually 6 accommodations within the reserve, just in different areas, and different kind of standards of accommodation. You get one with a butler and your private driver. This is much more relaxed. Get a nice little chalet. There's a waterhole right outside. You can see the size of this is a wide angle. It's not a miniature elephant. But there's lovely palm trees that have palm swifts flying around, a couple of resident herons, and the waterhole itself is full of fish. But nobody really knows how they got there because nobody put them there. But it is absolutely chock-a-block with fish, catfish, smaller, tilapia, all sorts. It's amazing. So that's always somewhere that you can sit and look at while you're back in camp. And this is one of the vehicles that we'll use while we're there. So you can see it's got the open door there. When we do the drives within Onguma itself in the reserve, we try and get those doors taken off. If we use that vehicle to go into Etosha, you have to have the doors on. But I mean, even with the doors on, you still get quite a good reach and it's a lovely open vehicle. It's a lovely place to take photos while you're in the camp as well as out on the drive. So these first few are around camp. So these hornbills, just hang around really on the floor with their sprinklers there. They wash themselves in the sprinklers. They eat from the trees. They're lovingly known. This is a chili, a flying chili, and this is a flying banana, obviously. So they are seen an awful lot just flying straight across, but it's lovely that they stop in the camp. And then unfortunately, this grasshopper made himself too obvious. So this hornbill had a good feast. The grey lories, or the go-away bird that you generally hear before they appear, they like to hang around the camp, as well as these woodpeckers. So this one just popped out before we were going on a drive this year, actually. And then the crimson-breasted shrikes, these guys are stunning. And normally you'll just see them fly across. You'll see a flash of red and then they'll hide in the bottom of a bush. Sometimes you can be lucky, especially if you're, hanging around camp and they make themselves known. But anything really from parrots to red-billed spurfowl, I still want to call them francolins, potato, coursers, and then any, they've changed these as well. I'll come back to you. Bustards, now they're bustards. But the biggest bustards is the Koi bustard, and you get quite a good density. Actually, this year was the most we'd seen of those. So you often see them walking around the plains, looking for rodents, and they'll, a bit like the secretary birds, sort of walk in a bit of a line. And when you see them fly, they kind of take off a bit. If you've been to Brazil, a bit like the Jabberoo stork, they sort of have a run off and then take off. But incredible to see. And one of our favourite birds in Africa really, is the ostrich. And these guys really lend themselves to the landscapes here. So you can get some lovely kind of white sandy backdrops, or you get them in the dead mapani trees where you get the lovely kind of golden leaves. And then if you're lucky and you get them to come up close, you can do some nice portraits with them, which is always good fun. More onto the kind of birds of prey, you get these, this guy actually is a pearl-spotted owlet, and he hangs out in one of the camps. So we stopped for coffee and he tends to kind of live in the trees around there. So it's just a bit of where's Wally to try and find him. And then you've got kites, so you can see he's having some breakfast. Kite? Oh, I've gone completely blank. Anyway, beautiful bird of prey. And then you've got martial eagle. So this guy was actually standing on top of quite a tall tree on the road out of Etosha. And there were about 2 cars already stopped, and he just stood there and posed for everybody. So clearly he wasn't too bothered, but it was the end of the day, so we were sort of being chased out of the park, but he was worth a stop for sure. So one of the most common things you'll see, especially on this eastern side of Etosha, is the dik-diks. There is actually a place called Dik-Dik Alley as well. So they are little bush antelopes. They mate for life. So you'll tend to see, if you see one, the other one will be really close by. And they're just lovely to watch. They sort of zip around, and generally they'll stop and stare at you. So you've got about a third of a second to get a shot of them before they run into the bushes, and that's it, they're gone. So yeah, they're really wonderful to watch. But this is probably one of the main things people go to Etosha for, and this is one of the main things, our trip initially was thought up for, was the ghost elephants of Etosha with this white sand that you can see. Um, so Etosha is known for its white sands, and you get these beautiful kind of open spaces, and when the dust, is blowing, uh, you get this beautiful dust behind them, or they dust themselves with it. So it's directly translated from the local language as Great White Place. And so you can see the kind of whiteness on the elephants that comes from that dust, and it's just gives them a real kind of character. And then also the dust, as people drive along, the dust lines the side of the bushes on the side of the road. So you can use that a little bit for some foreground, which is always quite nice. And then you've got the younger ones dusting themselves, and especially during the day, like Nick said, it does get hot there. Um, I had a thermal imaging camera that I attached to my phone last year, and we were driving through Etosha, and on one of the days I pointed it at the floor and it was 59 degrees centigrade. So it was hot. It didn't feel that hot. It was probably about 35, 40 in the air, but it was hot. So you can imagine these guys with their big feet padding on the floor, they need to keep themselves cool as much as they can. So the eastern side of Etosha really is where you get the big herds. So you'll get the big breeding herds of elephants, especially towards the end of the day. They come towards the waterholes. So you'll really get that lovely kind of procession of them. And if you're heading down a road and they're in it, you're stuck. Or if they're heading towards you, they'll go round you. So it can be a really incredible experience. And you get that lovely, if anybody's been to Botswana or anywhere in Africa and, you've had them near, you hear that little rumbling coming from them. And it's just a fantastic experience. And then if you're lucky enough to be there at the end of the day, this is kind of at the time where you should probably be heading to the gate. But we might have some opportunities actually in the reserve before sundowners. It's one of those things that the guides say, okay, what do we want for sundowners? I'm like, just to make sure it's sun gone downers, because you can't have, they always want to stop maybe 20 minutes before sunset. I'm like, you absolutely can't. You have to keep going until the sun is gone. Then we'll have a G&T just in case, because otherwise you miss moments like this. So that's, I think, one of the reasons, people do a photography trip, because we really focus on the light and the time of day that we can really try and make the best of it. Other lovely wildlife, you get kudus. So these lovely kudus. I mean, the females are beautiful, and I always think their ears look a bit like antenna, but the males really are stunning, aren't they? And it's nice to get them within the undergrowth. Springbok as well, they're really good fun to watch, especially when they're having a bit of a tussle, practicing their fighting. And this, you can see the start of a bit of the waterholes in Etosha. So you're always above them looking down. So for photography, some people not keen on that. There's nothing you can do. You are restricted to that within Etosha, but that's why we do some in the reserve and some in Etosha. But you do, you can still get some lovely images of them. And you're sometimes more eye level because things walk towards you from quite far away. So you get to see them coming, like those elephants were walking from a long way away. So you get some time with them. But also, when they're close, you really get to have some fun with them. So you can be a bit cheeky, and especially if they're drinking. So this one was actually drinking at the waterhole near us. And as they stop drinking, they lick their lips. So you get really nice opportunities. And one of Namibia's really iconic species is the oryx. These guys have an amazing system in their blood vessels to make the heat spread evenly over their body. They're able to choose if they want to give, not if they want to, but if it's worth giving birth or not, basically. If the rains are going to be good, there'll be baby oryxes around. So we saw quite a few this year, which was brilliant. So they're going to have good rains, hopefully. So the zebra, these waterholes are just full of life, and generally, a lot of them at any one time, running around, having a bit of a play, shouting. He probably wants to be in the front of the water. These guys are quite calmly having a drink, but you can get some lovely reflection shots. And then if you're lucky and you're there early, you'll get some reflections of some of them, some of the predators. So the jackals, they love to hang around the waterholes and near other predators. Obviously, they can steal, a bit like these guys. So spotted hyenas, you don't see a lot of them, but there are some places where they know that they hang out near the water holes. So it's really good to just kind of head there and see, and they do tend to be there early and late. So this is one of the next couple of slides. I'm taking a bit of a creative license. So these ones were in Okonjima this year, and we were so lucky. The guides knew where there were a couple of dens for brown hyena, and I'd sort of seen glimpses previously, but never been able to take, good images of them. So we were really blown away when one evening we were watching a leopard. And the leopards at Okonjima are collared, which is, one of the reasons we were sort of on the fence about it. So we were taking some photographs of this leopard, and she suddenly looked behind the vehicle, and we looked back, and this guy was just walking past us. So we ended up following it for quite a while, and gave us some beautiful opportunities, backlit. And then there was some at the den that came down to drink at this waterhole. And I mean, these opportunities, it was ridiculous. This is not a daily occurrence. Don't get me wrong. This was amazing. And then we went to the den. We actually went there in the morning and sat for an hour and a half, and nothing happened. The mum was there, she was asleep, nothing else happened. And then we went back in the evening, and as we got there, the mum was kind of lying there, and this little one popped its head out. So we spent a good probably hour and a half up until sunset watching this one come out, and then it was joined by its little sibling. And they were messing around next to the den there and just having a whale of a time playing with the mum while she was trying to sleep. So these guys, you can find them there. They are rare, but you never know what you're going to find. So as well as them, this side of Etosha is definitely the best place to find cheetah. I think they've got the biggest population of kind of wild, openly roaming cheetah in Africa. And I found it's been getting harder year by year to see them, but I don't know if that's because their range is changing. But they are just wonderful to see. And, you can see them, if you see them sort of posing, and they're just brilliant at sitting on a hill and staring at you, or, looking at what you're doing. Obviously the little ones need a little nap sometime. You'll see them walking around. And again, you can see this beautiful kind of white, both the acacia thorns and the white sands just give it that kind of ethereal feel. A couple of years ago, we were really lucky and found this mum and her 3 cubs. And then it got a bit ridiculous because we got even luckier, because she then decided to hunt an impala just up from us. So we zoomed around and just caught it afterwards. And then they were feeding on it. So it's not often you get an opportunity like that, but it's just right place, right time, isn't it? And then this one was last year, actually, in Etosha. These guys had taken down a springbok, and the mum and baby were munching on that. But the difference is really with Etosha, you've got a lot of vehicles. There's no limit on vehicles, whereas in somewhere like Onguma, they have a limit of 3 vehicles. So you never feel kind of crowded around, the animals feel quite relaxed, whereas in Etosha it can be a bit of a scrum, which is, not ideal. So we do more in the reserves if we can. This is generally where you'll find them. They are, I mean, like most cats, they are flat cats during the day. So they will find a termite mound with some shade and lie in it, basically. But yeah, they are incredible to see. And I think here in Kenya are probably the best, or maybe Tanzania, the best places to see them, just the open spaces. And once you get further to the west of Etosha, it gets more rocky and hilly, so they don't like that as much. So this side is definitely the best place to find them. So as well as them, lions are really good around this side of the park. There's quite a decent population in Onguma itself. There's a couple of prides, and they sort of obviously mix and head off and mate with somebody else. They do have fences. So Onguma is right along the fence line of Etosha, which is there most of the time. But if an elephant decides it wants to come through, that fence is open and things move. So you never know. They do get interbreeding and things do move around. But mostly, they are resident. So you'll either see them out in the open on the plains, like that male that we watched. He walked across the plains, and he was actually going into the bushes where these guys were. So one of them there. And then this was his brother, we believe, walking through the bushes. And they were going to meet the pride with these little cubs who were all playing. There's about 2 up in that top bit there that you can't really see, that were just messing about this log pile while the mums were waiting to go. And then we heard that they were walking, so the guide realized they were heading towards a waterhole. So he zipped around the corner to this road. And we were just really lucky to be in the right place for them to come straight towards us while they were heading to the water. And that's one of those things, you don't know when they're going to be looking at you, but oh, that was quite a moment. Um, and the little cubs, I love it. And I love it, any baby animal is gorgeous, isn't it? But there's something about a lion cub. So yeah, it can be fantastic for big cats. And then another one of the big draws for Namibia is the rhinos. I mean, obviously rhinos are struggling so much globally, but they have really good projects across Africa, but across Namibia where they're doing quite a lot of conservation. And on Guma, they have anti-poaching. So at most of the reserves, they have anti-poaching, and so people stay with them most of the day. They're tagged, so they know where they are. And these guys were actually fairly new. They're two brothers who had moved across from the west side of the park. So we had a couple of really nice encounters with them, but they seem very relaxed, and it's just lovely to see them, enjoying themselves. And there's not many places, I think, where you can kind of see them in the open and just free, really. Often, though, you will kind of find them beginning and the end of the day. And obviously, for photography, that can be quite challenging. This was one shot I took a couple of years ago of this white rhino in a waterhole. And I was thinking at the time, "Ugh, it's getting a bit dark," and people were asking about settings. And I said, "Do you know what? There's a couple of times where it's either put down your camera and watch it. There's three. Put down your camera and watch it. Pick up your phone and just, take some with your phone. Or for me, I've started doing a lot more of is video. And I'm hoping this is going to work because this was a moment. There you go. So this rhino was he'd come to the water, he'd obviously had a hot day. And there's some of those moments where you're on a wildlife trip and you think, I feel really privileged to be in the presence of them. I mean, I don't have children, but the next generation, the one after, they might not have this if we're not careful. So I think any kind of moment like this, you really have to just enjoy and treasure. So often I love photography, but videos just bring it to life a little bit more. And I do encourage a little bit of a mix of both if we can. But he was just absolutely loving life. I just imagined him staying there all night, just probably wallow in it. It's not a bad life. I wouldn't mind that. Leopards are something we don't see very often. I think I've seen one in the last 3 years, and other than brief glimpses, and actually this was a fairly brief glimpse. While we were having dinner, somebody suddenly said leopard, and one of my rules is never leave your camera in your room. What had I done that night? So I ran to my room, grabbed my camera, got back just as she was leaving. So the only option really, because the light was so low, was doing a bit of panning. But actually, one of them came out quite nice. But yeah, incredible to see, but very rare. If you want leopards, this probably isn't the place. So one of the reasons that we do spend time at Onguma is their hide. They've got this fantastic hide with windows for each person. You get your own stool, you get a little bean bag, and they bring all the coffee or gin, depending on what time of day. No gin for breakfast. Shame. So they bring all of the stuff there, and then they leave you to it. And there's a toilet outside, and we're just basically there for 2 hours in the morning on one day and then 2 hours in the afternoon on the next. And it really just gives you the opportunity for things like this. So there may be not so much water in some areas of the waterhole, so you get this kind of rocky, muddy feel, or you get the lovely reflection. So it really depends on which window you are, and we tend to kind of say switch the windows, but it's a lovely opportunity to just get a different perspective. These waxbills are gorgeous, and normally you see them flitting around the little bushes, and they're in the tiny undergrowth that you can't see them. Here they just come and sit in front of you. So there's a couple of logs around, or they'll sit on the edge as they're waiting to drink, and you just get a really different view of them, which you wouldn't normally get. So it's a fantastic opportunity for the smaller birds that normally you just see disappearing into a bush. And these golden-breasted buntings, if you can get them when the sun is coming up, you can see it just brings them to life. It is beautiful. And then one of the jokers of the bush, this is the go-away bird again, giving full headdress. So these guys, again, you will hear them normally before you see them. And they are called the go away. For those who don't know, they're called the go away bird now because their call sounds like go away. And don't worry, I'm not going to do it, but look it up if you haven't heard it. Pied babblers, starlings, and then the other jesters of the bird world, the guinea fowls. These guys turn up in huge flocks, running around and chasing each other. And so great for action shots, for panning, depending on the light, and for lovely portraits, which is always nice. As well as whiteback vultures, then the Cory bustards again, and then some of the mammals. So impalas is one of those things that actually you see them everywhere. And in the western side of Etosha, you actually get black-faced impalas, which is, there's very few places you find them. But it's one of those things that you'll get to the last day and say, okay, is there anything that you still need a photo of that you haven't got? And a lot of people go, I don't know. And I say, have you taken a picture of an impala? And they go, no, I don't think I have, because you see them everywhere. So it's one of those, those things that really, it gives you that lovely scenery for them as well, just not, taking it by the car. And they are really beautiful. And a lot of people, actually a couple of people on my last trip, it was their favorite, the one that they were most excited to see. So it is lovely to see them and to get some pictures of them with some behavior. Also warthogs, another thing that normally you'll only see the back end of. So it's lovely to see them a bit more relaxed. I'm going to say a bit because they are always quite jumpy. But at least you get some nice portraits of them. And then another jumpy one is jackals. So they tend to come up and have a quick drink, and you can always see, it's one of those things around waterholes. You can always see the pecking order quite easily because, the one will submit to the other and disappear. And, as soon as an elephant walks up, everything disappears, or a lion. But these guys come sort of one by one and have a little drink and then head off. So it is just a lovely way to spend a few hours, to be honest. Things like this, you normally just drive past, or you get them with such a messy background. So it just gives you the opportunity for some different shots. And then the oryx, as I was saying, the iconic species. And then giraffes, which are probably the funniest thing to see at waterholes because this is how they drink, and watching them kind of get down and go back up is always quite amusing. And then the beautiful kudus, you can't ever go wrong with a kudu. This guy's quite a regal looking one. And then these two young lads waiting their turn after he's gone. And then you do also get some smaller things. So as well as the birds and the smaller, guinea fowls and things, scrub hares. For the first time this year, actually, we had a couple of scrub hares turn up. And then a couple of years ago, right next to the window, to the point you could almost not use a camera for it, this mongoose was running around the little rock pile there. So yeah, it's amazing what the variety you can get there. And if you're very lucky, then, this is what we'd all love to see, isn't it? Lions coming. So yeah, if you're very lucky, these come along and you get them drinking. Unfortunately, this was a year where there wasn't that much water in there, so reflections were not great, but still lovely to see. And then, like I say, the main thing that people love to see at a waterhole is elephants, because they do put on a good show, splashing themselves, each other, getting in. So yeah, that's always quite a bonus if they turn up. So yeah, it's a lovely way to spend some hours, and we have 2 sessions there in our 3-night stay. So the next day we then head across Etosha. Now Etosha is quite big. So the pan there is it looks like a lake. It is in fact a salt flat, and it when you actually look at it and it is hot, the heat haze does make it look like a lake sometimes. But don't try and walk across it because you won't make it. It is about 50 kilometers at some stages wide, and about 130 from east to west, from end to end. Some things do walk across it, and it is quite an incredible feat of nature. We don't have enough water in our bodies, but a lot of the wildlife then goes out onto, especially on a windy day, they'll hang out just on the start of the salts because it is open. They can see any predators coming, because obviously if they're in the bushes and it's windy, anything can pounce on them. So we are based in Onguma, right on the right-hand side, so where it's the Von Lindequist gate, further to the right there. And we go all the way across, straight across the south of the pan, past Okukweyu, and then down to Anderson Gate, and you can see Ongava there. So that's our next stop. So on the way, we'll stop at a few water holes. As it gets later, it gets really, really hot. So actually it's not so pleasant to stop. So we do tend to kind of motor for quite a lot of it. But obviously, if we do see something, we will stop. And Okukweyu that I just mentioned is one of the government camps, and there is a spot there that we know these ground squirrels have burrows, and they are just fantastic entertainment. So we do tend to stop there if we can for a few minutes and just have a bit of fun with them, and they always put on a good show for us. So it does take maybe 5 or 6 hours or so, depending on what we see. But then you arrive at Ongava, which is about 30,000 hectares, I believe. Really nice variety to Onguma. So whereas Onguma is quite flat and that side of the park is the white sandy flat trees, some Mopani trees. The west side and Ongava is a lot more rocky with cacti and red sands. And, as you go across, you sort of see the change in the termite mounds, more palms and hillier. So it is quite a hilly lodge. You do have a few steps to get up and down there. But beautiful rooms, really nice sized rooms, and a lovely view across the escarpment there. So this is the view from the main restaurant area. So that's kind of pretty much the whole length of the property. So to the other side of those hills, the 30,000 hectares, and then way over the other hills to the left as well. So this photo was taken in 2024. And if you just look at the color of the ground, it's so dry. It was really kind of sandy and brown. And this was the same this year. So you can really see the difference, the green and the trees at the base, the grass everywhere. The water hole is a man-made water hole. And actually you can see, well, you can't see it that well here, but where the fence goes from the right diagonally in, there's a little hide here, which I'll come to in a bit. But that is, again, one of the main reasons for coming here. They've got a few slightly different birds here. So Montero's hornbill, which you won't really find in a lot of other places, but you will tend to see here. But really, I mean, I could spend 3 days just walking around the rocks here, and anyone who comes with me will know if they can't find me, that's where I am. They have groups of banded mongooses that live in the rocks there. But the main draw for me and for most people in the rocks is these rock hyrax. So these guys are so characterful. They run around the rocks, the trees, they munch on the leaves. They'll pose for you. They will run away from you. They will peer at you. And during the day, sort of when they're trying to warm up, they'll just be lying flat on a rock. So for photo opportunities, for me, I absolutely adore them. If we get there in the right time on the first day, it's our time to get kind of backlit shots of them or really nice light shots of them, because the rest of the days are out for activities. But it's a lovely time to kind of get them when they're active, and the light is beautiful at that time of day. So you can have a bit of fun with them when they're on the rocks and, some backlit leaves or some really lovely golden light. And I just thought I'd put this one in because it does make me laugh. This one was just staring at me, and I thought he looked quite evil anyway. And then he yawned, which I know, this is when you can make things comedy, that he was laughing, but he was just yawning. But crikey, he looks a bit mean. And this year was very exciting because there was a melanistic dassie. So a couple of the staff had been saying they'd seen one and nobody believed them. And so we looked for it the whole time. And on the last morning, we mentioned it to a few of the ground staff, and one of them came in and, I found it. And it was just sort of at the top of the rocks. But I've Googled it and I haven't come across any of them online, but absolutely fantastic to see. Don't know if he is the only one, but yeah, he was pretty special. So as well as the rock hyrax, you also have dassie rats, which are generally under the terrace. They're quite flighty. You won't see a lot of them, but if you're lucky, you can grab a quick snap. And for the first time this year, actually, I saw klipspringers, which were sort of at the base of the rocks outside the rooms. So these guys like to live in rocky climbs. So I wasn't surprised, but I've not seen them before. And actually, I mentioned it to the staff, and they hadn't seen them. So I don't know if it was a one-off, but it was a lovely experience for all of us anyway. And then on the first night drive on the way back, we spotted this chameleon in the tree, and he stayed there for the whole time we were there. So 3 nights we stayed, and we went to see him every day, and he was in a slightly different place, but generally slept in the same spot. But it's always an exciting thing for me. I'll get to the small stuff, don't you worry. But this, yeah, he was fabulous. So the elephants do tend to quite like this waterhole. So as I said, it's quite this is very close to the waterhole. So if you to the hide, sorry. So if you are in the hide, you'll get a fantastic view of them. But if you're out and about, they do get very close and they are so relaxed. So you do get some lovely photos of them. And this is kind of out in the reserve, so you can see the slightly different feel that you get, the long grasses, the dust, the slightly higher ground in the background gives you slightly different backgrounds. Quite a lot of bush and there's some dead mapanis, which give you a bit of colour with the kudus. And then you get the hill to use as the backdrop, which is, gives you something a bit different. As well as them, they also have a really good lion population. There is still some of this white sandy area in bits of the reserve, but most of it is a bit more bushy. But it is lovely to see them in this because they tend to be a bit more ginger, I think, over there, and they are really beautiful. So they have these. Well, I mean, they go anywhere around the reserve, but they do tend to quite like these open bits, obviously, because it's easier to hunt. So this one was in the Onguma Reserve, and then this next one is in Etosha. And you can really see the difference, I think, of how hard they have to work. He's a lot thinner. I mean, I think he's a lot older, but you do see, I'll just go back to him, you do see a slight difference. I think, they are obviously slightly healthier. They've got less area to roam. But I think that, they've got more food. So these guys in Etosha do have it quite tough. So you've got a lot of different couple of different prides, and they do move around a lot. This guy we found lying down, and I don't know if you can see, but one of his eyes is quite damaged, and that they obviously have territory battles, and the males battle, and I mean they all battle. They're all so war scarred, and of course when they're hunting, this was a young one waiting to be told he was allowed to have a bit when the male had finished, and it's just really interesting when you have a situation like that to see the dynamics between them. But some of these males can really hold their own. Slightly further west, we went this year to Safari Hook, and they also had a really good population of lions. This one, again, slightly scarred on his face, but they've got a lovely area to roam. And so really nice to find them kind of when the light is good. And again, these tall grasses over here are gorgeous. And on our last morning, we were about to leave. We were just sort of having breakfast, and I saw something walk to the waterhole. I said, I'm sure that looks like a cat. And I got my binoculars, and it was. And I said, oh, does anybody want to go? There's a lion. And everyone was like, nah, don't know. We'd had these fantastic lions the night before. And about 2 minutes later, I got my coffee and sat down again. And I said, I think there's 7 lions now. And we all just grabbed our cameras and got in the vehicle and went down to the waterhole. And they were just sitting there drinking at the waterhole. So we had this beautiful kind of 10 minutes with them while they were there. Lovely little family setting, and the light was still stunning. It was still quite early. So yeah, you can, if you're lucky, again, timing, it's always timing, isn't it? But we will, we weren't supposed to go on a drive, but the driver was around and he offered to take us. So they know for photographers, if we do want to get there, they'll get us there. And obviously where there's lions, you will find jackals because they are looking for food. And again, these guys have a really good rhino population, some brilliant white rhino numbers. And last year we had a baby, and this year we even had a young one, and we actually had sundowners. This was taken on foot while we were having sundowners, maybe 50 meters away. So they're really not that bothered. He was just looking up and then carried on eating. But again, you do often find them at the end of the day when the light is a bit rubbish. So sometimes panning is quite a nice option for them as well. They do have black rhino. They're not seen as often. They are quite shy. So if you do see them, it does tend to be in the bush, but always a really lovely thing to see. Really good bird life there. This was a Namakwa dove that we saw an awful lot of. And there are maybe 4 or 5 different types of dove, but these I just think are the most beautiful. Kestrels, which fly across looking for all the poor rodents. Sunbirds, which generally like any of these kind of flowers. And then sandgrouse, which love the waterholes, and you tend to kind of hear them coming as a flock when they fly over. And then if you're lucky to get some nice light at sunset, then something like a roller will if it poses in the right place. You never know. So this is the hide. So this was some lions that we were watching there. But again, this is the elephants, and you can see the hide in the bottom right there. So it's really not very far away, sort of 5-10 meters from the edge of the water. So depending on where things choose to drink, you can get some really lovely opportunities. So that's your view from inside. But we've had things like African hawk eagles there. Like I was saying, the giraffes, you can really have some fun when they're drinking and getting up from that. And then the lions, they're maybe less than 10 meters away. It's just the most amazing experience. You can hear them lapping. But one of the things really that is the draw of Onkava is the black rhinos at night. It's I'm not going to say it's a given but touch wood, it's fairly reliable that at night they will come to that waterhole. So that hide is accessible at all times. You can head down there after dinner, during dinner, before dinner, and you'll get some really lovely opportunities. And I tend to use black and white for them because the light there is quite yellow, so it doesn't really lend itself. But you have some lovely opportunities, whether it's them on their own, some of them bring their calves. And this year we had a crash of rhinos. So we had, I think, about 8 at one point. So it is an incredible opportunity. So brief zip through Damaraland, because we've had some amazing sightings here, and it's one that we're debating at the moment how to include. But Welwitschias are these flowers here on the left. It doesn't look necessarily like a flower, it's not blooming at that time, but these last for hundreds of years in this crazy environment in the desert, and they're very rare. They were discovered by an Austrian called Welwitschia, and they are a lot of people actually go there specifically to see them. So yeah, amazing to see. But this is one of the best places to see desert adapted elephants. Nick will talk about another spot further north, but there's about 34, 35 in this herd around the Uhab River. They've got about 6 bulls. The rest of them are all female or young. And they essentially they'll drink every 3 days or so, but they've adapted themselves. You can see, I don't know if you can tell, but their feet are a lot wider, their legs are a bit longer so that they can eat from the camel thorn trees. And they get, water from the succulents as well, so that they don't need to get to the water so much. But they've got this enormous range, and they just kind of walk up and down. They are resident in that area, but they can walk up to 70 kilometers for water. So they will walk up and down the river for quite a way. So you've got to be lucky to find them closer to you. As with most elephants, they'll have a bit of a tussle, even as babies. And you get lovely views of them in the actual riverbeds, which is always really nice. So that's always quite a nice add-on if we can do it. And always nice for elephants are brilliant for texture, kind of close-up, contrasty shots. So then we head south down towards Swakopmund. And this is a seaside town, only 120, 30 years old now. So still quite new, mainly for people who work in the mines in the area. So there's a lot of mining around there. One of the biggest businesses is salt. So you'll see a lot of kind of salt flats like this around on the edge of the roads. And actually a lot of the roads are built from compacted salt. So this is just compacted salt driven across, and they do it every 2 years or so. And as you drive along, you'll also see some of these, they have lots of little lakes where they're dehydrating the salt, getting rid of the water. But this pink color is caused by salt tolerant algae, which shows up as this pink color, which apparently is the same pigment as carrots. So it's not great for things to eat, but it's this algae that kind of separates itself as the salt is solidifying. So it's fantastic. And the sand that you'll find there is amazing. So this is just one handful of sand. And the red is made of garnet and the black is magnetite. So you can use a magnet and actually collect all the magnetite from a handful. It's incredible. So it's really interesting. You see it as just a sand, but and this is the fog wall. So there is a lot of fog across the coast, up and down the Skeleton Coast. Generally rolls in during the afternoon. So you'll see it in the morning back there, unless it comes in like this and then it'll stay overnight and sort of head out again in the morning once the sun comes up. But this kind of seaside area is really good for wading birds. So anything from plovers in the by the sea, in the the flats there, or they've got some lovely areas of wetlands there where you get the flamingos. So this is then heading down towards Walvis Bay. You get some lovely portrait opportunities. You get them feeding there right in the shallows. Depending on the tides, they're either further in or further out. And then you've also got some lovely opportunities with them flying over or flying past you when you're in the dunes. So it's a lovely place to go, and we generally spend a morning or an afternoon there. Also with some pelicans. If you're lucky, you'll get some great white pelicans. And then we head to Sandwich Harbour, which is just slightly further south, known as the place where the dunes meet the sea. And it's a fantastic place to kind of drive through and get, various sandscapes, and just really see where the wildlife can thrive, which is incredible. So a lot of lovely lookout points, or you get some, abstract opportunities. Ostriches tend to really like it up here, so they wander up and down the dunes, and then they sit down in the lower bits where the bushes are. And then this year we were really lucky to see some with babies, which was lovely. And then also in the more kind of the more bushy areas, you will get more of the kudu springbok, and also Nara crickets, which we were lucky enough to find this year. And one of the big draws really around Swakopmund is the Living Desert Tour. And we've done this a few times and actually made the decision to do it privately, just so that we get a bit more flexibility. But you'll get things like these shovel-snouted lizards, and all of these things are there normally, and you will find their tracks. Some of them come out at night, some of them are just too fast normally. This guy unbelievably posed for us. The Palmato gecko, which is one of the things that we really hope to see. This is the most beautiful gecko. It's sort of almost translucent with its skin. And if it licks its eye, it's just fantastic to watch. And this one this year just stayed for a good 5 minutes and didn't move, which was amazing. And if we're lucky again, the Sidewinder adder, these guys sort of move winding across the sand, so they leave a lovely track. And then they bury themselves in the sand so that you can't see them. You just sort of see these eyes. Burrowing skinks, these are not the most beautiful, but absolutely fascinating. So you just see them very briefly and then they'll head back down the sand. But my favourite by far is the Namakwa chameleon. This is the first one I've actually seen in a bush there. So they'd actually seen it the day before and he was still there. But normally this is how you see them on the rocks. So they walk across the sand, they hunt in the sand. It's nice to do a bit more wide angle to show, a bit about where they are. They change colour. Generally, if they're a bit more angry, they'll get darker. So he's not a happy bunny, so we left him to it. And then I did just put a slight video. I know I'm running out of time, but I'm just going to show you a tiny bit because it does make me laugh that despite the fact they don't live really in the trees, these guys haven't given up that behaviour. So normally chameleons do this to pretend that they're a leaf or a branch, and yet I don't think he realises that rocks don't do this. So it was quite funny to watch. And I've tried putting this to music, but I wouldn't subject you to that. But yeah, always quite entertaining. So as I said, next year, we're going to be heading down to Sossusvlei. So really embracing the dunes, spending some time. So excuse me, these photos were from 12 years ago when I was last there. But it hasn't changed. It is beautiful. The dunes are just, magical. And especially we'll be staying in a place where we'll be in there first thing to try and get the best of the light, no people. It does tend to get windier later on. So if we are there later, it can add some character, but it is just a beautiful place to see the landscapes. And you'll see things like ostrich and oryx there as well. We'll go to Deadvlei, which is an old riverbed, which is sort of gradually becoming stone. So it's gradually petrifying over the years. These trees are just kind of static there. And it's really best to get there before the people if we can, so we will try. And this is why, because this is kind of how it gets later on. So you get the footsteps, you get the people. So yeah, we will try and avoid that if possible to get a bit more of this. So that'll be exciting. But then sometimes if there are some people, they can be an interesting addition. And then we'll head back to Windhoek. So that is kind of the main trip. Nick's going to get excited now, but I'm not quite done because it's me. I'm just going to talk really quickly about a few of the little things because obviously I normally take my macro lens. And actually this year I left it at home thinking, "Ugh, I haven't used it that much." And of course, after the rains, there were so many things. Every morning when I came out of my room, there was something on my door. I thought, oh. But even if you don't have that, there are still, you know, with 100 to 500, or even with my 400, actually, I've done some of these. So really good dragonflies. And especially things like this, if it's a really sunny day and you're around camp and you're a bit bored, you can have a bit of a play with some black and whites and just use silhouettes. One of my favorite things, and anyone who's been there with me will know this, I love an agama. So rock agamas, either on the rocks or termite mounds. Ground agamas will generally be on the termite mounds. They can be on the walls around the hotel. They can be on the mud piles next to a lion. If we're watching a lion, it will be me going, "Oh, there's an agama," and you know, we'll just slightly reposition the vehicle as we're leaving. But also, you'll get skinks, various different types of them running around the lodges or around the water holes on the rocks. And then things like this sand lizard, which are really beautiful, sort of pinky orange. And then leopard tortoise, if you are lucky as you're driving, hopefully not over them. But that's generally the only time you'll see them is when they're along the road there. But lovely to see. And you can, if you're not in the park, get out with them. Cicada, this was this year. You'll hear them before you see them. You have to sort of follow the sound and then find them, but they are really beautiful. And then these guys in the desert as well. So whenever we're in the sand dunes in the desert, these tokis are one of the main things that you'll kind of see running around, bit like this. They just race across the sand. They've got these really wide legs. This is another version, like a white toki, but they have these wide legs and they just run really fast on this, bit like the Jesus Christ lizard in Costa Rica. Blister beetles, I wouldn't want one of them to bite me. And then termites, which can be really stunning. And then one of my favorite things, which I've before this year only ever seen in a petrol station in Namibia, but these flower mantises, which are fabulous. And then some really very evil looking ants, which again, I wouldn't want to run into without any shoes on. So always wear your shoes. And finish on some prettier things. So some butterflies. There were some of these blues around the camp this year. So while we were back for lunch, I just spent some time chasing them, following them, waiting for them. So yeah, lovely variety. And you never know what you're going to find. And then one of the best things, especially any desert area, sorry if anyone freaks anyone out, but there's a really good population of scorpions, either in the rocks or in the trees. So I do tend to take a UV torch as well and give it a bit of a bash with some night shots. So that is the trip. So we've gone through all of the areas. If you want more information, like Nick said, there will be a poll. I said the Sauterflay is the addition for next year. And there's been quite a lot of feedback about the vehicle that we've been using. So one of the other things that we've changed for next year is it's only a group of 6, but there will be 2 of these vehicles. So you will have a row each inside. So there are 3 rows like this, and you will have a row each with your window, fully opening windows and the opening roof. So hopefully that'll give us a bit more flexibility. And again, like Nick said, it is a premium trip, and that is why it's kind of added to the premium, because really that'll give you a lot more flexibility than we've had previously. So sorry for talking a bit too much, Nick, but over to you.
Hey, listen, I'm happy to listen about Namibia for a very, very long time. And I'm also really happy to talk about Namibia for a very long time. But I promise everybody I'm not going to do that. I'm going to really, really hold myself back. But Emma, thank you so much. God, I have to say, I really, really, really wish I could take photographs like you can. They are wonderful images, really, really lovely. And for me, being somebody who's so passionate about Namibia, I really like the fact that you went there a long time ago and you've returned to Namibia since there, and you have now sort of got that passion as well. And it's great listening to someone else's growing passion for this really, really spectacular country. And as you say, that trip, I mean, I've got to say, it's going to all the right places for keen wildlife photographers to want to go to as well. You know, that eastern side of Etosha, the southern side, the coast, and that desert area, absolutely stunning, both for wildlife but also for scenery as well. And I've got to say, you're absolutely doing it in the right way by having those 2 vehicles as well, because keen photographers, you need to have that space to move around.
Yeah.
So you're doing it in absolutely the right way. What a trip. Amazing. Fantastic. And I think that anybody who goes on that is going to come back with more images of everything that casts a shadow, let alone just the elephant and just the lions, etc.
Yeah.
You know,
Definitely
so
some
that's great.
rockogamas. If you don't come back with a photo of an agama, you're fired.
Or Hyrax, I take it.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Listen. Shall I just quickly give a 5-minute overview of the trip that I did, which was always the plan. This isn't a presentation about the trip that I do this evening. It is very much a presentation about Emma's trip, but we wanted to make people aware of the trip that I lead each year as well, just for balance. It's a trip which is pitched at the same price point as well as Emma's too. And whereas Emma's, as you clearly get the message, it's very much focused, no pun intended, on the photographic side of traveling to Namibia. Whereas mine is a trip that I put together many years ago in my head, and then about 12 or so years ago, actually put together and ran for the first time. It's called A Living Desert, and what I wanted the narrative for my trip to be is to explain about life in hard, arid environments of Namibia, to challenge the misconception that just because Namibia's a really hard, arid, desert-like country, there can't be that much wildlife there. And I put this trip together to illustrate the fact, well, no, on the contrary, there are many different types of aridity within Namibia, different arid environments. And within those different arid environments, there's an abundance of wildlife, and not only abundance of wildlife, but fascinating wildlife, and also hard adapted wildlife as well. So that was the narrative that I wanted to be the subtext, the through line, if you like, of the trip that I run each October. It's not a photographic trip, I've got to say that. If you're wanting a photographer's photographic trip, join Emma on her trip. If you're a keen general naturalist who wants adventure and exploration alongside wildlife and scenery, then perhaps consider this one. So Emma, if we could just move on through the slides. This is how we travel around for A Living Desert. The reason that we use the Grand Caravan, the C208, is because we're covering big distances in a relatively short space of time. Plus, we're going to some fairly remote areas. I say fairly, we're going to some extremely remote areas that would otherwise take us a considerable amount of time to travel to by land. And believe me, I have done that, and it does take a considerable amount of time. So flying is a good way to get around this particular itinerary. And it also adds to the narrative of seeing the changing arid landscape from the air as well. So our starting point is exactly the same area that Emma starts her trip in, which is on the eastern side of Etosha. And again, we also go to Onguma. Now, Onguma's got a couple of different accommodations within its private reserve. Emma goes to the fantastic bush camp, whereas for us, we go to the forest camp, which is also fantastic, but just slightly different. And the reason that I'm keen for the eastern side of Etosha to form part of the narrative on this trip is because in October, it's exceptionally dry. It hasn't rained typically for about 7 months, possibly 8 months. The wildlife is still there in abundance. And really what I want to show for this phase of the trip are these massive congregations that you get of wildlife, and varied wildlife as well. You saw in one of Emma's map images of Etosha National Park, where you could see the enormous salt pan, and then these tiny little circles that were dotted around the salt pan. Well, it's those tiny little circles that are the water holes. And some of the water holes are solar pumps, some of them are pumped in from tanks, and the others are natural thermal springs. And the wildlife congregates around these very small water holes in huge numbers. And it only really happens in September and October, just before that mid-rain starts in typically in November. It's an amazing scene to see, out in the middle of nowhere, having driven for a couple of hours sometimes into the park, to certain water holes, to come across quite literally 500 or even 600 mammals all there waiting around a water hole that probably doesn't have a footprint that's greater than 20 feet, across. You can sit there in the vehicle and just watch the wildlife come and go. And it's a great way to observe the hierarchy between the wildlife, and also to understand the patience that the wildlife has for some species to wait their turn to go to the water's edge. It's an amazing scene, and there's also the majesty at that time of year of the large herds of elephant. And at that time, the breeding herds are pretty lively. So the breeding herds, led by the matriarch, they're usually about 15 to 20 or so in a family herd together. But at certain moments, and it seems to be mostly in September, October time, these breeding herds come together and they can form these mega herds, which can be sometimes about 150 altogether. And I found myself once in a vehicle on one of the roads in Namibia on the eastern side, absolutely surrounded by dozens and dozens and dozens of elephant. Thrilling, quite terrifying, but thrilling as well. And that is also one of the narratives of a living desert in this arid area of Namibia and of Etosha. The way that massive amounts of wildlife are able to survive with very, very little water, it is an adaptation that they have made there. Then, like Emma, we then go over to Onguma, and we stay in the same lodge at Onguma because it's amazing. So we fly over Etosha, we see the salt pan, which is absolutely majestic, and then you really do understand that translation that again Emma said about Etosha means great white place. The High Com community named it that centuries and centuries ago, we fly over there and we come to Onguma, Ongava, and Ongava means place of the black rhino or place of rhino, and it's a beautiful habitat, and you'll have seen that from Emma's photographs as well. But it is absolutely stunning. I travelled some years ago, and I had an American client with me, a lovely guy called David, and we were having our sundowners way out in the reserve with the group, and the sun, as sundowners do, it was going down, and far off was this rhino, and it was absolutely beautiful. It was a pristine moment, and David, he turned to me and said, "Well, I think we found perfection here, haven't we?" And it really is just a wonderful place. Hot as anything. I mean, I don't think I've been anywhere hotter in Namibia, but it is absolutely beautiful, and the rhino are there. It's a wonderful place for other animals as well, like the elephant, and there are lions there as well. There's leopard that I've seen there, but it's that hide that really provides just a thrilling experience, a wildlife experience. I'm not a photographer. I don't claim to be one, and I rather enjoy putting my camera down and watching the wildlife that is there, that comes. And you can go down to that hide morning, noon, and night. It's there for you. You have to be accompanied down there, and you just sit and wait and see what comes along. And it's just wonderful when these guys come along and you're sat 10 meters away from them, and you're sat at their feet, just looking up at them, and it's just wonderful. And everything comes to this waterhole, and I haven't got any photographs of the black rhino there, because all the photographs that I take are absolutely dreadful. And that's why Emma's trip is great for photographers, but it illustrates her photographs beautifully illustrate those evenings at Ongava at the hide, where sure, it's not 100% guaranteed, but I'd put money on the fact that if you go there, the black rhino will come, and you'll have probably more than half a dozen of them as well. And it's just a beautiful place to experience. And that southern side of Etosha, as Emma says, is slightly different arid environment to the eastern side. So then from there, having done that phase of a living desert and salt pans, etc., then we'll fly over to the Kalko land. And the Kalko land is up in the northwest. Unbelievable place, absolutely amazing, dominated by these ephemeral rivers. I could talk forever about ephemeral rivers, dried river systems that flow only for about 10 to 14 days of the year, and only when there has been a phenomenal amount of rain in their catchment areas. And their catchment areas stretch inland hundreds and hundreds of kilometers, and their catchment areas gather in water from tens of thousands of square kilometers, absolutely vast amounts of land, bringing in huge amounts of water. If I could turn my camera to the right, on my wall, I have one of my prized possessions, which is a very large map, which shows the ephemeral rivers of Namibia. And I must thank Alison and Mick and Richard and Wendy, who were 4 of the group on my very first trip of a living desert, who are here this evening. I've seen their names, who bought me that map as a gift at the end of the trip. So thank you very much for that. It's prized possession right here beside me. But these ephemeral rivers are absolutely stunning areas. The water comes rushing in. It flows, as I say, for 10 days, maybe 14 days, something like that. The water then evaporates into the air, as well as sinking beneath the ground. When it sinks beneath the ground gets baked over rather like an eggshell, and all that water sits underneath the surface. And because of that amount of water, there's a lot of vegetation. And because of there's vegetation, there's massive amounts of wildlife, such as these guys. The springbok are there, impala are there, oryx are there, giraffe are there, mountain zebra are there. And if those kind of animals are there, you can be damn sure that these kind of animals are there. And these are the critically endangered, and I mean critically endangered, desert adapted lion. Most of them, and I say most of them, in total, the numbers fluctuate, but in total at the moment, I understand that there's about 12 of them. And most of those 12 are collared, and they're collared by a phenomenal guy called Flip Stander, who's basically the guardian of these desert adapted lion. The numbers have been as low as 5 or 6, and as high as slightly more, up into the low teens. But at the moment, I understand there's like 10, 11, 12 of them, something like that. And they are unbelievably hardy and extremely highly adapted predators. And there are some predators, some of these lions now, two of the females are taking their young right the way out onto the beaches and right the way up to the Angolan border, and they're now being referred to as maritime lions. But anyway, they are absolutely beautiful, wonderful, incredible encounters, not guaranteed, but if you do see them, terrific. There is no doubt, though, that if you go here, you are highly likely to see desert adapted elephants. And beautiful, incredible experience to be had, because when you go to this area, you understand just how hard it is to exist here, how inhospitable it is. It's a long way from civilization. It's truly, truly wild and truly, truly rugged. Yet it sustains populations, albeit small, but small family populations of these beautiful desert adapted elephants. And in the Windhoek River, which is the dried river system that I was just showing you images of there are 2 resident families one of 8 and the other one of 12. So there's about, well, there are 20 of them in the Huaneb, and they basically move up and down the Huaneb river system, browsing on the vegetation and drinking the water that their parents, that their mother has shown them where the water is. And they also go right the way out to the coast as well. But really, really stunning. And there's a couple of bulls in that in the Huaneb as well. So there's about 22 or so desert adapted elephants in that river system. Then from the Huaneb, having done safaris like this in the Huaneb, we stay at a fantastic lodge right in the Huaneb River itself. From here, we then take a drive right the way over the Skeleton Coast, like the high desert plain of the Skeleton Coast. And we go into the one of the most northern ephemeral rivers, which is this one, and this is the Huarusib. And the Huarusib is different from the Huaneb. The Huaneb is very much sand-based, whereas the Huarusib has been cut through this incredible rock landscape, and it's formed this incredible canyon. But there are desert-adapted elephant here as well. There's a lot of water in this river as well. The water here is much closer to the surface, so there's marshlands, beautiful birding in here. There's incredible geological formations, what's called the clay castles, which were formed thousands of years ago from floods. But we will spend time in the Huarusib, having done this incredible drive that takes us further north to it, before then cutting straight out to the Atlantic. And we will end up here in the most remote part of the itinerary, which is this unbelievable accommodation that was only put up about 6 or 7 years ago, I think, now, and it's called Shipwreck Lodge. It's eye-wateringly expensive. I make I don't try to hide that in any way, because it is so remote and so difficult to run, but it is one of the best places I think I've ever stayed. It's unbelievable. The wildlife is, of course, very, very good. The scenery, however, is off the scale. And the clients that I've bought here have all been, well, I'm going to say impressed is not the right words. I don't think Carolyn will mind, but in certain cases, moved to tears by the beauty of the landscape. It is very rugged, very remote, very beautiful. And this, I think, is a part of the itinerary where it's not about a wildlife safari, although we see good wildlife here. It's actually the harmony of wildlife and the scenery. So it's a scenic safari at this point as well. But it really is just the most breathtaking place to go to. And flying up here makes it a whole lot easier to get to and also get out of as well. So from there, we then fly all the way down the Skeleton Coast to Swakopmund. We have a night in the same town that Emma's trip goes to. We'll do a bit of birding there as well, the lesser and greater flamingos and pelicans and so on around Walvis Bay. And then we will go to the desert. And I want to show you this picture because this is the Desert Research Foundation. So this is at a place called Gobabeb. And this is at the great, what I have now adopted as a definite term for it. I call it the Great North Wall of the Namib Desert. So the Namib Desert stops suddenly at its very northern edge. And that's because of a river system, an ephemeral river system called the Kuisib River. And so when the Kuisib River flows, it washes all of the sand that has been blown into it from the Namib Desert out into the Atlantic Ocean. So for hundreds, thousands of years, the Namib Desert hasn't been able to get over the river. And so Gobabeb has been built here. It's a very basic research facility. So, it's a bit of a bold move, taking people from Onguma Forest Camp and from Ongava Lodge and Shipwreck Lodge and Huaneb Elephant Camp and all of these beautiful places to a pretty primitive research station. And I'll be honest with you, most of, if not all of the guests on within the first hour are looking horrified and ready to strangle me as well. But I promise that by the end of the stay, they usually cite it as one of their favorite places on the trip because of its simplicity. But more than anything, it's because of the knowledge that is here. There is no better knowledge about the desert than at this Desert Institute. Scientists from all over the world come here. It's absolutely beautiful. And there we will go out into the desert. We will do walks into the desert. We'll learn about desert morphology. We'll learn about desert adaptation. We'll learn about the fog that comes in from the sea. That is the thing that gives life to the desert. So it completes the narrative of a living desert, because it doesn't rain in the desert. Everything depends upon the sea fog that rolls in and rolls out every single night and how much water it gives. So we will learn about life in the desert here. Yes, we will see some wildlife, but that's not really the main point of coming here. The main point of coming here is to learn about the adaptations that the wildlife have made. Well, we will find dune lark, and we'll find them, and we'll see the tracks that they make. We'll go out with one of the scientists to do other tracking in the morning. We call it reading the morning news. We'll see a little track such as this. This is made from the dancing white lady spider. We won't show you the image next just yet, but the dancing white lady spider, you can see here, it looks like a little flower, doesn't it? But the indentations that it's made is that little circle in the center is from its abdomen bouncing up and down, and then those little kind of petals around the outside, those are from its feet. And what it does, it vibrates like that and actually spins round, and it does that as a dance to attract the female. If the female doesn't like the dance, the female kills the male. That's that. If the female does like the dance, then the female says, okay, we can do what we want to do here. We're going to make some little baby white lady spiders. And then the female then kills the male. Charming. So this is what the white lady spider looks like. Look away if you don't like spiders, but this is what it looks like. Gets to the size of, I don't know what it would be the size of. Perhaps if you imagine a golf ball, about the size of a golf ball, something like that. Let's move on from that though. The other things that we get fascinated about are the golden moles who swim through the sand. They don't have eyes. They just swim through using the whiskers and using their ears. Amazing sense of sound. And they don't travel on the surface typically. They swim through the sand, creating these beautiful trails. So we'll go out and we'll learn all about those. And this is the beautiful Pamata gecko, which Emma was very excited about as well on the tour that she does from the coast, and also down in Sossus Bay as well. And that's where our A Living Desert tour ends. So it does Ongava and Onguma, which is arid environments of the salt pans of Etosha. It does the Huanib and the Huarusib and the Skeleton Coast, which is all about ephemeral rivers and the adaptations that the wildlife has made to exist in areas where there is mainly no water, but water at certain times. Then we'll go down to the Walvis Bay Lagoons, plenty of water there. And then we'll go to the northern wall of the Namib Desert, which is at Gobabeb, which is not as far south as Emma's trip goes to, which is down in Sossus Bay. So that's our trip there that we do in October as well. So there you go, quick little overview there. We've got to do some questions. So if you have got questions, please fire them in now. We'll spend 5 to 10 minutes wrapping up with those. But I think we should launch the poll while you guys are thinking of questions. So I'm going to put something up on your screen now. Emma, has that appeared?
It has.
Yeah, great. Okay, so if you would like to have some information sent to you about one of the trips that we've been talking about, A Living Desert, or Wonders of Namibia, a photographic safari, then please request one of those travel plans and we'll send documentation to you first thing tomorrow. There's another trip that's called a wilderness adventure. That's a group tour that's run by a local guide. And then we've got a self-drive option for Namibia as well. Self-driving in Namibia, by the way, is great fun. Really, really good. While you guys are doing that, I'm going to answer a couple of questions. How far away is Namibia? Well, where from? From England, Oscar says. Well, I know exactly how far it is. It's 7,200 miles from London to Windhoek. I know that for a fact. But that's not really what you want to know. You can fly there a number of ways. The best and most direct ways to fly there are with BA from London to Johannesburg, and then Johannesburg to Windhoek. You have to do it as a transit in Johannesburg. You can do Lufthansa, who do obviously London or regional airports to Frankfurt or Munich, and then there are Frankfurt and Munich flights that go directly down to Windhoek. Or you can do Ethiopian Airlines, again, one of the London airports, and there's probably regional ones as well, that go into Addis Ababa, and then from there you can transit and then go on directly down to Windhoek. But there are no direct flights. There were decades ago when I first started to go to Namibia. Good old Air Namibia had a direct flight from London Gatwick, but that didn't last longer than about 2 weeks. But yeah, those are the easiest ways to get there. Right, okay, Emma, one for you. Do you need prime lenses, or will zoom work okay considering light levels? That's not one for me, that's one for you.
Oh, shame. Some people come with a phone. You don't. If like the Rhino at night, you would struggle probably with sort of 100 to 400 or 100 to 500. I tend to take a 400 2.8 and a 70 to 200 2.8 if I can, and my macro. I have to say, generally, I have been doing quite a lot of the wide angle stuff on my phone, but to be honest, going to Sossusvlei next year, I might take a wide angle as well. You don't need one. Generally speaking, it's only maybe 5-10 minutes a day where it's going to be really, really low light. Other than that, it's one of the most reliable for good light, and it can be, you know, like the black and white elephants, it can be quite bright. To be honest, if you have kind of 100 to 400 or 100 to 500, that is a really good all-rounder because it does all of the distance stuff, but it's also really good for the butterflies, for the living desert stuff. So actually that's my go-to for that one, if that helps.
Awesome, that's great, that's great. Hey, do you know what? I thought there's loads of questions, but everything else is from people who have either traveled with you before, saying how great it was to travel with you and how fantastic the Namibia trip was, or messages to me saying the same thing.
It was just reminiscence.
Yeah,
it's lovely.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you very much. There literally are no other questions. Needless to say, everyone, if you do have a question about Emma's trip, then give her a call and have a chat with her about it, and she'll answer any questions that you have about it. Same thing for the trip that I lead, A Living Desert. If you want to talk about Namibia just generally, I'm sure that either of us will happily talk to you about Namibia generally as well. If these trips aren't right for you, or you're looking for something else, then fine, please, you know, do give us a call there. So we're going to wrap things up there. There's a £250 discount on these trips as a special offer that is there at the moment. You just need to quote that reference there, NBI Zoom 25, for up to £250 off per person. So that's great. The next Discover Wildlife events are going to be next week. We've got bear photography around the world on the 25th of November. I think that's with you again, isn't it, Emma? And Brett.
Sorry, everyone. Yeah, it's myself and Brett next week.
Awesome, awesome, that's great. And then a couple of days after that, we've got Sensational Wildlife of the Subcontinent. So that's India, and I think that we've got one of the local guides joining us for that one as well, which will be great. Okay, so look, I think we're going to wrap things up there. It's 9 o'clock. on the nose. So for those of you who haven't fallen asleep, good night, sleep well, and I hope that we've warmed up your November evening. Thank you very much, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.